Hello and welcome to 18 WJTS Inform. Legislation has wrapped up in the state of Indiana, and we're going to talk with State Senator Mark Messmer, who joins us in the studio. And this first show that we're going to talk about is basically going to be focused on the budget, because that's the primary job for this time.
That's our only constitutional duty to do is be there, every 2 years to do a budget.
And then next week we'll talk about some interesting bills and high-profile bills.
Right.
So let's get to work on the budget. What has happened with the budget this year for the Indiana State Legislature?
All right. Well, the good news is we did project from our last budget to this budget a significant increase in revenue to the state. Our three primary sources of revenue are sales tax, number one. It's over half of the revenue to the state is on sales tax. Second is personal income tax. Third is gaming revenues from the lottery and the casinos. And then fourth is business income tax. And then the other ones there's a variety of smaller pieces that fall down from there. So we did have a significant chunk of new money to work with, and our number one priority has been, since I've been there, is to make sure we have a truly structurally balanced budget in both years of the biennium, and maintain, for us, is to maintain a reasonable level of reserves. This budget has each of the budget years, from what we had projected income and what we plan to spend, we have a $70 million buffer each year. And I think, based on the revenue adjustment that we got, the day after we voted on the budget the first time, between Medicaid expenses going up and revenue dropping, we had a $130 million adjustment we had to make after our budget passed 2 weeks ago in the Senate. So we were hoping it would be flat. It was not only flat, it was $130 million, to the negative. So took some, but we had buffered. When what we passed out of the Senate had built into it about $150 million of flexibility.
Okay.
So we didn't have to do, major changing from what we had in our overall numbers. The House had a little higher projections than what they, in their version of the budget, and so then the last, week or so of conference committee time, it's House and Senate budget, chairman really fine-tuning, where the adjustments were going to be made in different categories. Fortunately, since our revenue overall from 2 years ago was up, it was not, drastic cuts needed, but we did have to make adjustments, and really had gotten down to, Monday morning, as one of the Senate leadership team, Senate leadership, House leadership, and the governor's folks, sitting down on Monday morning saying, okay, here's where the governor is, here's where the House is, here's where we are on 2 or 3 final pieces, and everybody kind of come into agreement of what to do. Tuesday morning, get together with that group again and fine-tune changes and really get. It was really down to 2 or 3 small pieces. We all kind of had the same end goals, and some of it was just which were you going to take it from last year's reserves on some of the pieces? Were you going to, how were you going to fund some of that? Just the final details. But everybody had the same net target, so it wasn't really, super difficult. But through that, like I said, a structurally balanced budget both years leaves about a $2 billion surplus in the overall state reserves. With that, $2 billion sounds like a lot, but really only about $500 to $600 million of that $2 billion is what I would call, cash that's readily available. Some of that is in reserve funds for different types of accounts that we need to or have to keep in place. It is cash balance, but it if you had to go after it, it better be a drastic emergency to actually cash some of those reserve funds out. Spends $763 million additional money on K through 12 education. That's the biggest increase we've ever had, from budget to budget. Okay. I think last budget cycle we increased it about $450 million, and the 2 prior to that about $300 million. So this was a significant increase, and of that, $539 million of that goes into what we call the school funding formula. And within my Senate district, every school, and we worked at how do you come up with a base, the base dollars per kid versus how much do you build into the complexity index. That's where the Senate version was significantly different than the House version, to make sure schools as across the state, as our poverty levels have dropped across the state, and school districts had a lower percentage of what they called poverty index or complexity index students, we had to adjust that ratio of how that split worked out, and our Senate version of that is what prevailed at the end of the day. Each school in every school in my school district gets between $100 and $150 million, or $100 and $150 per student more per year, and which means all of them are getting more money. Obviously, Warwick County Schools being the biggest school district in my district, they get the most in total dollars, and Jasper gets a lot in total dollars just because of the size of their school district. But those two school corporations actually get the least per student, but then all of the other schools, because their complexity index is by far the smallest. Pike County schools are actually getting less money. They're getting $150 more per kid, but in each of the 2 years they're projecting to lose 50 to 60 kids in their overall, and it's probably just from not as many young families, as family sizes, used to be 3 kids per family, now it's 1.8 kids per family. I mean, as all of that, normal demographic changes have played out, they're just dealing with less kids, and it's been a trend that's been going to about that magnitude for a long time there. We pay down $150 million of the teacher pension fund, debt obligation, which saves all of the schools across the state. It'll shave 2% off of what they pay into the teacher retirement fund as part of every school. Part of their expenditures is funding the teacher pension fund. We put state dollars in it, they put local dollars in it, but us paying down, and one of the big discussions is where's that money going to come from. We ended up taking that out of reserves from last budget cycle. We had we had a couple $100 million left after the last budget cycle that of money, more money came in than we thought. So we took $150 million of that to pay down that future debt. It'll cut their rate on what the interest, the percentage rate that they pay in by 2% forever. It'll go from 7% to 5%, of their total teacher contract, or the total payroll expenses. It cuts at 2% now, and even if the market changes, go up or down, what that will build into forever is a 2% reduction no matter where the rates are in the future. So that's real money that they save forever, and our intention to them, as we've told school superintendents across the state, we expect to see that show up in teacher pay. If it doesn't, that's not our fault, and we've asked them to have public hearings before that 2% reduction that they're all seeing. We want that identified and where it's going in a public hearing. It could be at a school board meeting, but we want to specifically have them tell their constituents where that savings now and forever is going, and we expect that to be allocated to teacher raises. Can't make them do it, but that was pretty much known. We're increasing what we call the teacher appreciation grants by $15 million over the biennium, $7.5 million more each year, and that's money that goes straight from the state budget directly to take that it's 75 million, divided over the biennium by the number of teachers, sent directly to the schools to be applied to teacher pay. So, and it does include a 13th check for all retired teachers, and really all state retired employees will get. We haven't built in a cost of living increase into their pension fund, for probably 6 or 8 years. But we've all, in each of those years, we've given them, instead of 12 checks, we've sent them a 13th check each year, and that's in both years of the biennium. And increases the school safety grants by $20 million over the biennium. So we had, I think, $30 million over the biennium the last several budgets, and increased that to $50 million. And That will allow, I mean, they can apply, in each school corporation. I think, and we've actually even in one of the other bills changed how much they can apply for. I think they can apply for, up to $100,000 per school district. It was 50, and they can use that for safety or school resource officers, hardening of schools. I mean, whatever they, whatever their school district needs to help fund, school safety programs. In higher education, we have $4.2 billion going to the university system, and part of that is direct support to their programs. Of that, $761 million of that is basically tuition support to students, the 21st Century Scholar Program, normal financial aid grants, and a new school of veterinary science for Purdue.
Okay. About
a $73 million expenditure there, but they are overcrowded in their vet program. Their facility is about, 45 years old, and they need to build a new building, or they could potentially lose their certification to the veterinarian program, and that'd be a pretty big impact to Indiana. We're pretty agricultural dependent, and I mean these are your vets that work in the agricultural world, your cats and dogs. So glad to see that. They had been kind of pushing for that the last couple budget cycles. This year we got it done for them. We have in that $5.1 billion to spend in the Medicaid system. It's we get some of that money from the federal government, some from the state government, but that's a pretty big chunk of our budget is Medicaid spending each year. And it increases the Department of Child Services budget for, and a lot of those increased expenditures we've seen the last couple of years are from a lot of families that have drug addiction issues that they're dealing with, and support programs for kids that are in those caseload scenarios, and money for foster care families, but $500 million increase. So we were expecting more money through this biennium. 2 years ago, we were not anticipating a $500 million, increase in DCS spending, but actually that we took reserve funds from other accounts during the past budget cycle to fund DCS to that same level. So, from what they actually spent during the last biennium, I think they spent $400 to $500 million more already. We've got that built into this year's budget. Had we not had to deal with that, we'd have had money to do a lot of other things.
But those things will come up.
They will.
And it needs to be addressed.
Absolutely,
Yep.
Absolutely. In the Department of Corrections world, we've increased the funding to local county jails from $35 per inmate per day for level 6 offenders to $40 per inmate per day within this budget. They've been asking for more money because when they house level 6 offenders, the state does pay them, for that, but they haven't had an increase in their jail funding from the state for probably 15 years. So it was due, and I'm sure we'll continue to try to move that forward, each biennium for a while. And it allows for the state police to purchase 3 machines that can test for THC content. And you say, what do you need to do that for? Well, the product in the marijuana that makes it hallucinogenic is THC. Since we've legalized growing industrial hemp for farmers, moving forward, when you've got something that, might look like hemp, might look like marijuana, how do you know what it is? The federal government has legalized growing hemp. We've now set parameters up to start that in the state, but you got to be when the state police find somebody and has it on their possession, which they shouldn't have, but if they claim it's hemp, we want to be able to test for it. And those are about $100,000 per machine. So we'll have 3 of those that will end up located in different regions across the state for that. We have also in the budget $3.5 million for a new swine barn at the state fairgrounds, which is dilapidated and overdue. So they were happy with that. We got a couple of tax provisions built into the budget that were new changes. One was for companies like Airbnb, that they call marketplace facilitators. We require them to collect innkeeper's tax and sales tax for an Airbnb host if they have more than, I think it was 10 or 12, whether if they rent their house out more than, I think, 12 times a year, the facilitators that do that have to collect the sales tax and innkeeper's tax, and then remit it to the counties or state, whichever the person was. A lot of the places like Expedia, they will advertise a hotel rate that's marketing-wise is supposed to be the same as if you called the hotel and got the lowest rate from them. Mm-hmm. But they were only paying sales tax on about 80% of that. They were carving out a chunk and calling it their facilitator fee, and only paying sales tax on maybe 75 to 80% of that, which was gypping the state a pretty good chunk, because if they call it a service, then we're not allowed to charge sales tax on it. So the way they were manipulating the advertised price and then what they were paying sales tax on was significantly less. So that should work its way into the sales tax number going forward. A few other, $435 million in road money, extra road money to NDOT for road repairs. $100 million into a rural broadband grant program. That was my bill. Mm-hmm. So very pleased with that. $90 million to go to trail projects across the state, through DNR. $20 million to fund nonstop flights out of the Indianapolis airport to destinations across Europe. And $205 million for a double tracking system for the rail cars that go from Northwest Indiana into Chicago. And if they'd actually have dual tracks the whole way, it would speed up and maximize utilization of that, for people in and out of Chicago each day. And that's probably that's
there's a lot. There's a lot of moving parts in that.
A lot more details in here, but yeah, just try to hit the high points.
Okay, and this is the budget, and so next week we're going to talk about some bills that are maybe high-profile bills that aren't necessarily budget related, but are bills that was passed.
Yes.
Well, as always, we appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure.
Getting us up to date on the budget that has been passed by the state legislature this year for Indiana. Thank you for watching WJTS Informed. Certainly, thank you to Senator Mark Messmer, who has been joining us every Friday since the sessions have opened in, was it January?
Yep.
It's okay.
Yep,
Time flies when you're having fun.
Oh, I know.
All right. Thank you, Senator.
My pleasure.
Thank you for watching WJTS. We're local people watching local people.